Imagine a god owes you 3 favors. Now, you've already used 2, and then one morning, you find your wife hanging from the ceiling, and the note in her hand says your son did this to her. You don't investigate, you don't ask, you walk to the shore and spend your last wish. Let me tell you this story. On the southern coast of Greece, where the hills of the Peloponnese meet the Saronic Gulf, there was a city called Troezen. Small, old, salt-bitten, the kind of place where the temples outnumbered the markets. And in that city lived a prince named Hippolytus. He was the son of Theseus, the man who killed the Minotaur, who'd been to the underworld and back, who now sat on the throne of Athens. But Hippolytus didn't care about his father's legacy. He didn't care about politics or conquest or the social games of the Athenian court. He cared about one thing: the hunt. Every morning before dawn, Hippolytus was in the hills with his hounds. He ran with them through pine forest and over limestone ridges where the air tasted like rosemary. He built altars to Artemis, the virgin goddess of the wild, and he meant every prayer he said to them. He lived clean, no wine, no lovers, no desire. Now, in ancient Greece, the gods didn't ask for your belief. They demanded your participation. You could acknowledge Aphrodite existed and still offend her by refusing to participate in what she represented: love, desire, the heat between bodies. Hippolytus looked at all of that and said, "No thanks, not for me." And Aphrodite noticed. Now, she doesn't rage, she doesn't argue, she simply decides, if this boy won't honor me, I will use the people closest to him to destroy him. And she chooses her weapon carefully. Phaedra, Theseus' wife, Hippolytus' stepmother. Aphrodite plants desire in Phaedra's chest, the way you'd plant a seed in soil, quietly and with full knowledge of what it will become. Phaedra didn't choose this. She didn't look at her stepson one day and decide to want him. It arrived like a fever, like something crawling inside her ribcage that she couldn't pull out. She stopped eating. She lay on her bed for days, face to the wall. Her servants whispered. Her nurse begged her to speak. And when Phaedra finally broke, when the shame became heavier than the silence, she confessed. "It's him, the prince. I can't stop it, and I would rather die than act on it." That is important. Phaedra is not the villain. She's the victim. Now, Phaedra's nurse was an old woman. She'd raised Phaedra since childhood. And she loved her the way old women love the children they bring into the world, fiercely and without much patience for suffering she thought she could fix. So the nurse did the one thing Phaedra begged her not to do. She went to Hippolytus. She told him everything. Now, what would you do if someone told you your father's new wife was in love with you? Think about that for a second. The woman who sits across from you at dinner, the woman your father trusts above everyone. Hippolytus didn't pause. He didn't consider it. He erupted. He raged against his stepmother, against desire, against the nurse for even bringing this to him. He swore an oath on Artemis that he would never speak of it. He would keep the secret. But every word of his disgust carried through the walls. Phaedra heard it all, and in that moment she made a calculation. If this came out, if the court learned she desired her own stepson, her name was finished. Her children would carry that stain for the rest of their lives. But if she spoke first, if she shaped the story before anyone else could, she then wrote a note. She tied it to her wrist, and then she hanged herself. The note said one thing: Hippolytus forced himself on me. She killed herself and she killed him. One act, one rope, one lie that no one could cross-examine because the witness was already dead. Theseus came home to a door that wouldn't open. They broke it down, and there was Phaedra, swinging from the beam, the note still tied to her wrist like a ribbon. He read it. And this is where this story turns into something you never forget. Because Theseus, this legendary king, this monster slayer, the hero of Athens, had a gift. A gift from his father, Poseidon, god of the sea. 3 wishes, granted in blood, no conditions, no appeals, no reversals. He'd already used 2 of them in his lifetime. 1 remained. He didn't call for his son. He didn't ask a single question. He walked to the shoreline. He looked out over the water and said the words, "Kill my son." Now, if that just stopped you cold and you're not subscribed, what are we even doing here? Hit subscribe and select all notifications on so you don't miss any stories. Hippolytus stood before his father and saw in his eyes something worse than anger, certainty. Theseus had already decided, the curse was already spoken, and Hippolytus, bound by his oath to Artemis, couldn't tell the truth without breaking a sacred promise. He tried, he said, "I never touched her. I swear it on everything I am." But Theseus had the note, and the note came from a dead woman's hand. And what living man's word outweighs a dead wife's final accusation? Hippolytus was banished. He loaded his chariot, gathered his horses, and rode out along the coastal road where the cliffs dropped straight into the Saronic Gulf. The spray hit the wheels. The wind came off the water, sharp and cold. And then the sea moved. It didn't build slowly. It swelled all at once, a wall of white water rising from nowhere. And from inside the wave, something came. The ancient sources call it a bull. Monstrous, gleaming, a thing that had no business existing on this earth, born from foam and fury and a father's wish. The horses screamed, not the sound of animals startled by a wave, the sound of animals that understood they were looking at something that was divine and absolutely wrong. They bolted, the chariot hit the rocks, and Hippolytus, tangled in the reins, was dragged across stone, across root, across everything the coastline could throw at a human body. His companions found him breathing, barely. His clothes torn, his skin opened against the rock. They carried him back to the palace and laid him at his father's feet. And that is when Artemis appeared, the virgin goddess of the wild in the flesh. She came not through a door, not through thunder. She was simply there. And she looked at Theseus the way you look at a man who just burned down his own house with his family inside. She said, "Phaedra lied. Aphrodite made her fall in love with your son. Your son never touched her. He kept his oath to me, even when that oath cost him his life. The son you killed was the most innocent person you know." Theseus collapsed. There is no other word for it. The hero of Athens, the king who walked out of the underworld, folded. And Hippolytus, broken, dying, barely able to lift his head, looked at his father and said the last thing Theseus deserved to hear. "I release you from this guilt. I forgive you." He closed his eyes and the sea kept moving, the way it always does, as if nothing had happened at all. If you know someone who carries guilt like that, or who's ever been accused of something they didn't do, share this video with them. They will love this story. But here's another father who buried his son. And then the boy came back. He looked the same, he sounded the same, but something was wrong. And by the time the father understood what he was really looking at, it was too late. Click on this thumbnail right now and watch it, and I'll see you in the next story.